Hey everyone, this is our DAST 13.8 planning session where we're doing a design review and also figuring out scope for 13.8. Cool. And next question I have is, so when we run a scan, it'll create a new pipeline. Are we tracking that, or can we leverage that data to in the future show like a count? I don't know if that's useful information, but just so we can see how many times each save scan was run without having to like do a ton of work in the future to traverse pipelines, if that's even possible.
So we are tracking on-demand scans, but we're not currently tracking it at the level of individual profiles, whether it's scanner or site profiles. We might be able to do that to extend to capture it at this scan level, but it's a bit of an open question how we would approach that.
Where I'm coming from is it might be nice in the future for that save scans page to show more information, metadata about when it was last run, how many times it's been run. Derek, right. I don't know if that seems, or Annabelle, if that seems like a nice to have.
That sounds, I was gonna say, it sounds pretty cool. Just from some other competitors I've looked at in the past, if you look at a save scan, you can see the, I don't want to say trends over time, but you can see, you know, how many vulnerabilities it found the last time and then how many were fixed, and then see different graphs and stuff. Is that what you mean?
I guess it's limitless once we have the data. If we choose to do this in the future and we hadn't captured data, it's just from that point forward. So capturing data now means we have more information later.
Yeah, those are some of the things that I'd like to do eventually. Some of that falls onto threat insights, depending on the type of data that we want to show. Like the vulnerability tracking is something that we'd probably leverage what they are doing, but I agree. I think it would be good to start to, I mean, I'm of the opinion that more metrics, more data is better than less. So as much as we can capture, that would be great. I'm not sure. It's going to start to get kind of difficult, I think, with the pipelines. Once we have more than just DAST using the on-demand scans, and I know that there's several other scanners, other groups that are going to be using it. We can't just assume that they are DAST pipelines if they've got that run type of, I can't remember what it is now. Philip, I think you know better than I do, but basically right now I'm tracking on-demand scans for DAST just by looking for pipelines that have this on-demand run type, basically. So in the future, we're going to have to start tracking not just the type of pipeline that it is, but also the scan type, like we show in the, like Annabelle has in this page here. So I don't know if that makes things trickier or not when we're looking at the type of data that you're talking about, Neil.
Yeah, looking at the screen, like just having a last run. Well, yeah, so this is the history, right? But I think it's more so the save scans listing page, the new tab that we're adding over on the profiles. Yeah, so this tab, I'm thinking a column of some sort here that shows last run with a timestamp.
Yeah, I think I understand, Neil, where you're coming from. I don't think this is a quick fix, because what we're doing is when we take the scan, we create kind of its own pipeline, and that pipeline is no longer connected to the profiles or to the site profile. And so I don't think it's easy to say, well, okay, this scan that we're looking at on this screen has been run 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. You also run into like this data issue of you run it today, you have a pipeline, then you change the URL in that site profile. And then is that profile run twice? Is it run once? Because that data has since changed. So I think what you're talking about is a good idea. I don't think it's a quick thing to add. and probably would add a lot of scope to the initial work. So my recommendation is we should definitely look at that and go down that design path, but not, I don't see a quick way to add that in here, and I wouldn't want to hold up any of this work trying to figure out the approach for that.
Certainly.
Well, one thing that we could do that would possibly be a quick fix, but it wouldn't be super granular. And there are some issues with it, but since we're saving these in the database, these scans with the names and all that in the database, you could just have a counter, like a field for a counter in the scan table that we increment every time you kick off. Like every time you hit the run scan button on one of these, we could increment the counter in the database. But yeah, there are some issues with that, and it's not super granular, like you said. It wouldn't capture, if anything changed on the profiles, is that considered a different scan, or do we just say, hey, you saved it over the previous scan, so we're just going to count it as the same one? So yeah, there's some things to think through, and I wouldn't put it as part of the MVC or first release for this at all. I think we need to think through that data first.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea, but I also don't think this is the page where we would want that information to be stored, just because, like you said, if we edit the scan, then what does that mean? And if you delete it, then all that data is lost. So I imagine it would be probably on this page, which I think is still a bit of a question mark, but this is going to be here. Even if you delete that scan, you're going to know that that pipeline was run. So maybe we would want to associate it with that.
Maybe. There's also, I would like in the future to have a DAST specific reporting page. I've written up a couple issues around that to show information that's specific to DAST, and that is one of the things that I have on there. Is something that I would be interested in seeing, is like how many times or I guess tracking trends for the individual scans, and showing, like you were talking about, Annabelle, how many vulnerabilities were found, how many times it was run, how long the scan takes to run each time, and several other things. So it could be just a completely separate page that we put those on.
So just in the interest of time, should we, I'm not sure which the next item is in the agenda in terms of breaking this down and what we wanted to go over. These are all awesome ideas. I just don't want to start going rabbit hole.
It feels like the two main things for scope for 13.8 is the save scan feature. And then Annabelle covered a bunch of this already, but we have the UX tweaks that just make it easier to use, to navigate around. Those are currently separate issues, so we can consider if we want to do one before the other. Those are items number 1 in the feature list. And then the UX updates are front end only. I think we could extend one of the search boxes to use some back end to make the searching more friendly. We decided let's just do front end right now. To me, it sounds like those are the two things that we aim to accomplish in 13.8. Heavily considering we have super reduced capacity with the holidays, lots of PTO.
Yeah, so that works for me, and I think that makes sense. Derek, I just wanted to, yesterday we were talking about some of the API fuzzing configuration stuff, which I know is kind of a out of left field. If we move forward on this, I would probably need to push the API fuzzing configuration to 13.9, just because I think it's kind of late to, we would probably need to run another one of these sessions for API fuzzing configuration. Otherwise,
okay.
Like doing this work and the API fuzzing configuration, I think is just going to be too much. So my preference is to keep moving forward on this, since we're all on board. We kind of know what needs to get done, and then 13.9 we can look at what needs to be done for the API fuzzing configuration. But that's something we need to talk to Sam about.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk to Sam tomorrow in our meeting about that.
Okay. So yeah, I guess for everyone, stay tuned on that. That's my preference, but we may need to switch it around and instead focus on the API fuzzing.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. And that makes total sense to me, just keeping this scope as the main scope. As far as features are concerned, obviously there'll be some bugs probably that we'll need to take on. And, you know, if anything rolls over from 13.7, I'm still not sure what, you know, what all is going to be completely finished and delivered for 13.7. So, I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me to keep a super reduced scope given the holidays.
I mean, to me, I think one of the things I'm most anxious to get done is what we have as number 3, the branch selector, because that is going to unlock this feature for a lot of users, right? Because then you can have developers on there. Once we get to branch selector, the schedule, and all the rest, that's all nice, but that's not, those other features are not going to increase our count quite the way the branch selector is going to. Scheduler will certainly increase the number of runs as well, but branch selector, I think, is probably a big holdup for a number of customers.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
So yeah, all that is to say is if there's things in save scan that we run into that we can put on hold or whatever, I think save scan is our way to get to the branch selector, or that's the way I'd like to think about it.
Yeah, save scan is really a prerequisite for several things, but the branch selector and honestly, just one of the things that I think that I've heard from a couple of people. I mean, I haven't talked to too many people directly about on-demand scans, but is that they hate having to reconfigure their scan every single time they go to the page, because it's like, well, I already did this, you know, sure, the profiles make it easy, but I still have to select the profiles every single time I want to run a scan. So I think the save scans gets us a lot of things, but the branch selector is definitely a huge, huge feature that's going to unlock a lot of users.
Do we know yet what the distribution of front end and back end is for that? I know Paul has been doing an awesome job investigating a branch selector component for the front end. If that works, then we have the ability to load up the branches for a repository. I'm curious if we even need backend. Philip, do you know if that was developed that way? I don't know if you or Craig had already wired up a branch input.
So there's definitely I've wired up the ability to pass in a branch. There might be some remediation needed on the back end, but I don't actually think there's a whole lot of back end work needed to deliver this.
Awesome. So yeah, we could probably jump on that. You know, it slip it in sooner than later. Sounds like it's low effort, which is awesome. Hopefully, we'll have to continue refining it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scheduler is going to be the big challenge. There's going to be a lot to figure out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do we have what we need? Do we have the issues, the implementation, the front end, back end issues opened, or we'll just do that asynchronously after this call and make sure we put all the notes in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. I want to hear from you.
I was suggesting that we can do this async, I suppose. Get some implementation plans ready and break down the issues.
Yeah, for save scan, I think the UX updates are pretty well defined and ready to go. And I think capacity-wise for front end, Daraj and Paul can continue. I was waiting on you, Seth, to learn more about the API, the fuzzing stuff. But I'm comfortable, especially given the holidays and the PTO, having the two of them continue to tag team on the DAST work.
Yeah, I mean, my preference is to try to do DAST or API fuzzing. Doing both would not work. And since we just kind of came up with the API fuzzing in the last 2 days, it seems more efficient to just keep going on this path, at least for the next iteration.
Cool. And I think somebody mentioned carryover. I think Derek was curious. I don't know. the state of things. I heard from Diraj, based on the authentication and header stuff, we're extending the site profile to add the remaining inputs. I think front end is darn close. I think we were going to go ahead and merge that work behind the feature flag. And then once back end is ready, we can enable that. There might be some remaining integration work for fit and finish, but it's really, really close from what I heard from Diraj. I'm not sure about back end.
Yeah, from a back-end perspective, at least on that particular issue, there will be some carryover from 13.7 into 13.8. That's next on the work that I'm going to be starting after the separation work between the two pages is finished.
And so the adding the validation into the moving the validation out, that's what you mean? The separation of validation?
Yeah,
that's feeling
right.
pretty good.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I think front end, same here. Paul can speak to that for sure. He's super close to that work.
Right. So the front end is basically done for that. I think there has been some miscommunication between the front end and the back end. So we're working on resolving this some small issues in the GraphQL queries with Philippe. But apart from that, we're in a good spot for that part. So I think that we should be able to ship it in 13.7.
Cool. That would be great. Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, is there anything else that we need to go over for planning for 13.8? All right, I guess then we are probably done.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.